SwayamPrabha. Digital India. Educated India.
So, friends, we are going to discuss about another unit in that sense, that is unit 6, and it is on forms of sanitation and their social implications. I think we have talked in detail about the various aspects of research methodology. We have tried to speak about the various meanings and definitions, and apart from that I think we try to have the grounding of what the sanitation is. Now, let us say we try to understand that how the forms of sanitation in that sense can be seen. And I think when we try to speak about that, we are speaking about the different scope in that sense in which the sanitation can interfere, and most important in that sense of course is it will speak about the linkage of sanitation with other issues. I think the very basic thing in that sense which we have to focus upon is the issue of sanitation and science. I think we have talked about this particular issue in the initial phase, that how we have to make sanitation a science. And the most important thing in that sense is that we have to speak about the practical sanitation in terms of its utility, in terms of its consideration for its validity in the society, and that of course is going to be the scientific aspect of any hygiene, and that is where we try to locate the idea of sanitary science. But the most important thing in that sense is that whenever we try to speak about the scientific investigation, the important in that sense is the issue of verification. We have to speak about the various forms of disease in that sense, and how we are going to see it in a very technical sense. I think we try to speak about the biological problems which are associated with the analysis, which sometimes try to demean the consideration of the societal component. So, we have to see that we have to deploy the experimental methods. We have to speak about the specific cases in that sense which are not medical listed cases in that sense, but definitely I think public hygiene in that sense is going to be important because it is seen as an interface between the science and society. So, we try to see the experimental method which has to be used basically when we try to see the applied aspect of the sanitary question, and we have to deal with the issue of public hygiene which is seen as an interface between the science and society. And for that I think we have to speak about the various direct and indirect method. So, that way I think we have to see that sanitation and science in that sense has a common linkage. Either it is the question of addressing certain disease like typhoid, cholera or tuberculosis for that sake, or we have certain other issues. I think it has some societal bearing, and that we have to keep in mind when we are trying to speak about that. So, definitely one form of understanding in that sense is the science and sanitation. Another of course is the role of the state. So, we have the linkage between the state and sanitation as another aspect of sanitation, and when we try to speak about the state and sanitation, the basic idea in that sense of course is what are the various efforts of the state government in order to prevent the insanitary conditions, unhygienic conditions in that sense which are required for the society. But the important thing is that we have to speak about certain things which are basically related to the efforts of the men's environment in order to make the minimal cause for the disease, and that is where we try to see that the main problem here is that how the man can keep himself secure in terms of the food and the drink, the sort of contamination which is involved, how he can overcome that. And for that I think we try to speak about in the historical perspective of sanitation, that how the state were gradually interfering into various aspects, and we try to see that in 1907 we try to speak about the Sanitary Water System Act, which was basically meant for the Public Health Act also. So, we try to see that in 1915 when we try to speak about the Bureau of Sanitary Engineering under the State Board of Health, we try to see that there is certain assemblage between the state and the sanitation, and for that we have to see that it involves various aspects in that sense, trying to speak about the health and comfort of the people, the police power which of course is inherent in the government, and how they try to look after that particular thing. And we have to see that it is the time when the Magna Carta in that sense is trying to speak about that how the race has to be preserved, and for that I think the most important thing is that safeguarding them from the so called sanitation in sanitary condition or unhygienic conditions. And that is where we try to see that the role of the state in that sense is going to be crucial. And apart from that, we also try to speak about certain services which tries to represent the masculine and feminine element of the government, and the best part in that sense of course is that both of them are to be served, and that is where we try to see that it has to be net balance for both masculine and the feminine, and the state has to be the neutral player. And the function of the state health department in that sense has to be seen in terms of how the legislature in that sense is going to be crucial in order to understand the sort of nuances which are to be seen as part and parcel of the authority. So, the authority is to be seen as a matter of certain amount of arrangements like the court, we have to have the talk testimony, we have to have certain decisions in that sense, and the state department of health in that sense, police power in that sense are to be seen as an important aspect apart from the question of inspection, the supply of water, the steam pollution in that sense, all these things how they are going to be taken into consideration. And especially we try to speak about the issue of food sanitation and the sophistication of the drugs in that sense, or the sophistication of the sickness. All these things comes under the broader umbrella of the state and the sanitation. Another important aspect which is directly indirectly related to this particular issue is the sanitation and health, although it also can fall into the broader domain of the state, but somewhere we try to see that sanitation and health can go together, and for that the basic understanding is that the public health is basically meant to improve the health of the people, and that is the basic idea whereby we try to minimize the environmental hazards. And the important aspect in that sense is that we try to build up the healthy neighborhood, and for that the most important thing in that sense is that we try to speak about how the market development does not allow the population to function, and what is the role of the state in that sense to intervene into these processes. And we basically try to speak about that the public health which exists in terms of improving the health of the people has to be seen in a serious way. And despite various planning, sometimes we try to find that health for all is seen as an utopia. So, I think the concern is more towards how we can make it into practice, and it is basically the role of the government in that sense, which is basically helpful in providing the issue of the healthy citizenship. And that is where I think we try to see that the question of the budgetary provisions, we try to speak about the question of how things are to be seen in terms of education, in terms of awareness, or in terms of employment. All these things in that sense are going to be quite crucial when we try to speak about these particular aspect. And then I think we also try to indulge into the basic understanding of not only the eradication of the specific disease, but also our priority has to be more towards the issue of family planning, public health services, and also trying to see it in terms of how to reduce the exposure to the disease, and that of course is the bigger agenda which the government has to see. And in that framework we have to see that it can be seen as we have to speak about the hygiene and the cattle keeping practices, cleaning the irrigation canals in that sense, and trying to avoid the vector breedings. These are the things in that sense which has to be taken into consideration when we try to speak about the health and the sanitation. And that is where we try to see the question of epidemic which may occur has to be safeguarded by the intervention of the state, and that is where we have to see that health and sanitation in that sense has something to do with how they are going to be effective in terms of the healthy citizenship. And the basic idea in that sense of course is it is not only the question of putting the budget, but it is also providing the health services in that sense in the real sense, so that one can really prevent the disease. And then I think we try to speak about within that broader framework, we can also speak about the concern for the rural sanitation. And this rural sanitation, as the term itself indicate, it is basically